Today we're going to be talking about all things Miraidon EX. This deck won the Champions League in Yokohama, a 3,000 player tournament with the 151 set legal, so it's on a lot of people's radars to be a very powerful archetype going into our next set of regional and special events. So, with the new introductions of Mew EX and Zapdos EX, does this push Miraidon into being a tier 1 archetype and possibly even one of the strongest decks in the game? It's already got a huge result under its belt, and it's come on in leaps and bounds with Pittsburgh results, World Championships results, so it seems like there's definitely something around this archetype. It just seems like it's been laying dormant until we've seen more finalized lists that are more powerful. I'm also going to show two of my own deck lists for my preferences before we get into some gameplay as well, just a little bit towards the end, just to show off the deck. So the highlights of the 151 set are certainly the Mew EX and the Zapdos EX. Miraidon can take advantage of both of these cards. Mew EX is just a really powerful card. It provides free retreat for the deck. It also gives you a restart ability, allowing you to draw until you have 3 cards in your hand. This deck's actually pretty good at going low in hand size, so you can top up here and there, and it gives you a small safety net around Iono. It also has the genome hacking attack for 3 colorless energy. You can choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks and use it as its attack. It's obviously a very versatile option for the deck. We have energy acceleration via Flaaffy. There's also a Raihan specifically in this deck list, which I personally really enjoy. And of course, because this is a free retreat pivot, this can sit on the board. Even just attaching 1 lightning throughout the game is pretty okay here because we have so much other acceleration for our other dudes, especially with generators helping out with the lightning chaps. You can sit there with a 1 energy Mew EX and suddenly you're threatening so many different plays on the opponent by just offering up a Dynamo to plus turn attachment play in a ton of situations on the future turns. I think this specifically helps the Miraidon deck out against the Giratina matchup. It's also very solid at copying Radiant Greninja, of course. This is like the huge talking point of Mew EX in 151. How consistently, how often, how scared should we be of Mew hacking Radiant Greninjas against the likes of Gardevoir, against the likes of Lost Box, even against like Charizard decks. Like Lost Zone builds are also playing Radiant Greninja just for draw power. Are we forcing a Manaphy down into play to respect Miraidon? And I think the answer is definitely yes, not only because of Mew, but in this deck specifically, it's also playing that Zapdos EX. Zapdos is similar to Mew, really, where it just offers so much for the archetype all in one nice, neat package. The Voltaic Float gives this Pokemon free retreat if you have 1 lightning energy attached to it, so this can additionally be a pivot in the deck list. We've seen how important it is to have a pivot in the build in previous iterations with the single prize Zero Aura and with Flying Pikachu V. And this also comes with the multi-shot lightning attack for 3 lightning. We deal 120 to the active, and we can deal a 90 damage spread attack to one of our opponent's bench Pokemon that has any damage counters on it. That's why you're seeing a Hawlucha also in the deck for that flying entry option. It's not all about combining these two things together, because of course there can be situations, especially into like V-Star matchups, for example, where you'll hit with a Raikou or with a Miraidon, and then use a Rope or a Boss's Orders, finish them off with this multi-shot lightning attack, and hopefully 120 is a decent enough number for you to get through the likes of Barrels, Comphase, you know, these sorts of Pokemon, so it can also be a means of getting like a 3 prize turn over 2 attacks, which isn't the worst thing in the world when we're giving up 2 prizes constantly, so that's pretty okay. A lot of interesting cards within the build as well. There's been this stadium tug-of-war that we've seen since the World Championships with placements for path builds and non-path builds, continuing onwards into Pittsburgh as well. And, you know, this Yokohama result is another great reason why Path is a solid inclusion. I feel like you have the most well-rounded matchups when you do play Path to the Peak personally. I think without Paths, you really struggle into Mew and you really struggle into Gardevoir. So I definitely respect Path to the Peak for certain. There is minor anti-synergy with the 2 new editions of 151, though. You shut down your own restart from Mew and you shut down your Voltaic Float from Zapdos EX. So it has small downsides in this deck list. I suppose the main concept is that when you're using it against a Mew and against a Gardevoir specifically, these are the main reasons you'd want to path. Your opponent has to bounce them to really play the game anyway in most situations, so it feels like it's not as bad as it actually looks on paper. And we've seen that alongside Judge and alongside Iono, this can even be really solid against some Lost Zone builds just for slowing those down as well. So I personally really like Path to the Peak, and I feel like if I was playing this in a tournament, I would definitely be playing them myself. Collapsed Stadium is the other card. I actually also think this is really solid, very important for Lost Zone matchups. This list specifically isn't playing any Switch Carts, and that's one thing you can try and do. You can combine Bravery Charm and Switch Cart, try and stay out of 2-hit KO range of Crams and Sableye for a number of turns, but also a Collapsed in here is a great way to just undo essentially a turn of attacking from a Lost Zone player, so I also think that's really solid. Outside of that, a really interesting split of supporter cards. We see 3 Research, 3 Boss, 3 copies of Iono, 2 Arven, obviously helping you cherry pick Forest in the opening stages is huge, and cherry picking Generator also just adds to your early game consistency. It's also adding to your opening ball search options just to get tandem uniting into the game, which is solid. 1 copy of Judge alongside your Ionos for more aggressive, like early game hand disruption, and the copy of Raihan. It opens up the Mew EX to be much more usable, even with just 1 Flaaffy in play. I think this is actually really important against the Giratina matchup, and I also think it's really helpful against Mew VMAX as well, because that Raihan is helping the Raichu reach also with the extra attachment on top of Flaaffy and whatnot, so it relieves a bit of pressure on your generators throughout the game. So there is a lot that I really like about this deck list, and I think it's a really, really good shell. The cards that I specifically kind of don't gel with is the Super Rod. I feel like you kind of have to draw this at the right time for it to be a useful card. And also, I'm actually not a huge fan of Zapdos myself. I've tested a lot with Zapdos so far, probably about 10 hours worth of a Zapdos build of Miraidon, and even though you do get hidden value of forcing a Manaphy onto the bench, Mew can often do that itself if the opponent is also playing Greninja, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. And also, especially if you have to use it with Hawlucha, you have to really manage your bench carefully, and even then, because you're getting hand disrupted in so many matchups regardless, it actually doesn't align very well when you only play 3 copies of Ultra Ball for this Hawlucha. I feel like it's really rare to get this multi-shot lightning off. So the list that I'm going to show, the adaptations from this 60 that you're seeing in front of you, is going to be cutting the Zapdos Hawlucha package. Like I said, it does give you lines of play, and it is interesting. There are obvious upsides here, and obviously taking multi-prize turns into single-prize decks is huge, and obviously important for the amount of single-prize decks in the game, but I feel like it doesn't have a huge payoff, especially when Miraidon, given the choice, is very rarely bossing Manaphys. It really doesn't feel good to be doing that, just so you can threaten or Hawlucha Zapdos play on a future turn, because all these decks play Super Rods and Claras, so they just recover the Manaphy and Bob's your uncle, they're back, and once again the Zapdos is denied. Or even, in these matchups, if you boss the Manaphy, they boss the Zapdos, then it's gone, so it's kind of pointless anyway. So I feel like it doesn't come off too often, and that's been the card that I think is more niche, and something that I won't be playing in my Miraidon builds. Let's talk about my 2 lists then. We've had a long look and a long chat about the Champions League 60. The list that you're going to see in the videos is going to be a kind of turbo-y speed build of the Miraidon with a few throwbacks from previous lists that we've seen. Instead of playing Beach Courts, because we have the Mew as an additional pivot now, and I'm still playing Flying Pikachu because I still love the Fly and Thundershock panic play options that it provides the deck, especially into the Gardevoir matchup. This can be massive. When we're not playing Path, it feels like having this coin flip option is actually pretty huge to give us a chance in that situation. So I am just playing a Stormy Mountains. I've played around with a lot of stadiums in here. I've played around with Town Store, but I feel like there's too many decks that play Forest Hill Stone that it gives them the advantage, and I think it's really bad as a stadium bounce, specifically against Lost Zone Box, which is one of your trickier ones. And Beach Court also is really helpful for Lost Zone, and because Lost Zone is such a tricky matchup, especially when you're not playing Paths, I feel like this is the least beneficial stadium for them. It can allow the opponent to get a Raikou or a Dragonite into play, so they can search out a Forest Hill Stone target, but you're quite happy seeing multi-prizes hit the board, even if they're attacking with them. So this is the most helpful but least helpful to everyone else stadium that you could be playing, whilst adding to your own Path of the Peak bounce count, and just adding to your ball search options, really. I'm playing the Collapsed in here, huge for the Lost Zone matchups, and I'm also playing a Lost Vacuum. This is just a ladder climbing option, really, because there's a lot of mirror match right now, and if you are expecting a lot of mirror, obviously the Lost Vacuum is a huge card. It's similar to having Boss on a crucial turn, because you can remove Bravery Charm for easy Miraidon KOs. Now, there are situations when you don't need the Vacuum anyway. If you have enough energy scattered around your board, you can use a Raichu at times, but typically that would have been a massive high roll for you anyway, because they have somehow not taken knockouts or whatnot. So the Lost Vacuum is, again, a nice stadium bounce for you to unlock your Mew. It also is a -2 from hand, so it's unlocking your restart ability just in general, so you're getting maximum usage, similar to why I'm seeing for Ultra, or you're seeing for Ultra Ball in the deck list, because this build is really trying to reduce that hand size, top up, reduce that hand size, top up. That's the whole idea of this build. I really wanted to push the envelope and see just how powerful this ability is in Miraidon to gain additional card draw, and I think it's absolutely massive. So much so that you're seeing no Squawk ability in this list, because I really like having the Mew developed when you build around it like this, even min-maxing a Pokégear in here for extra dig towards, you know, 4th copy of Boss, for example. It's almost a half Boss's orders whilst also giving you early game consistency. It's also just an insta-play to help you Mew that little bit more often. So I really like this list. It's what I've been sort of laddering with a little bit here, and I think it's super duper consistent and low to the ground and gets into the game. You know, we're playing 2 extra ball search outs than traditional Miraidons with the Stormy and the 4th copy of Ultra, and yeah, I think it's looking very, very solid, to be honest with you. And this is going to be the deck for the video today, but I did also want to talk about, if I was going into a tournament, like a regional or something, I would probably still default back to the paths. I feel like it's still the best option, and when you are going path-based, I like having the Squawk back in the deck list, and I once again like having that extra supporter in there to just give you that little bit of stability. I'm still a huge fan of the Flying Pikachu, to be honest. I feel like it's a card that's bailed me out of too many situations to cut at this point, and it's a more easily tutorable free retreater that you can just use on your early tandem unit players and just easy you know, switch cart or rope into, that then gives you that donk potential that I think is absolutely massive. So I really like having a lightning type 0 retreat cost Pokemon even with Mew EX in the deck list. And again, Path of the Peak, really helpful card. There are many archetypes that have to bounce this, so there are still situations where Mew will top you up on cards and help you play around Iono and whatnot. So there will be situations where it still comes in. Even just being a pivot and a decent attacker at times means it's worthwhile. You don't have to lean into this ability all the time. You'll notice both of the builds that I've shown is also playing the Pokemon Go Zapdos. I think this card is, again, really crucial. It's a single prize attacking threat into the Gardevoir matchup to offset prizes. You can also use this against Lugia if you're knocking out Lugia V or knocking out Luminion Vs. This can be a way for them to stop Stonejourner spamming against you, which is absolutely massive. You know, force them to have a boss's orders on their crucial turn, which I think is huge. And of course, it's a math fixer. It's 1 less energy required for Raichu to knock out a Gardevoir EX or a Mew VMAX, which is obviously massive. And it's also helpful at buffing the Miraidon into knocking out 230 hit point Pokemon like Dragonite and like Tyranitar. So the Zapdos is definitely a keep for me. I'm also a huge fan of Flying P. So this is the build that I would be playing if I was going into a regional like tomorrow, if I was settling on Miraidon. I still feel like the Squawk, when you're playing a path-based build, makes more sense, because like I said, you don't have as many ways to go as low as you could with the previous build that I showed with your Mew, so you need to have that burst potential of a Squawk, to be honest with you. The one thing I would still try and work into this deck list would be that Collapsed Stadium. There's possibly an argument to just play 2 copies of Path of the Peak, similar to how we've seen Lost Zone Tinas just play 2 copies. Obviously that deck is better at amassing hand sizes, but there still will be, you know, with 2 Judge, 2 Iono, and 2 copies of Path plus a Forest Seal Stone, you can try and manufacture a turn where you are going Path Hand Disruptor and make life difficult for the opponents. So I feel like that could still be pretty reasonable in the deck, even as kind of that lower count and not going full commitment to it, and then just using it in the matchups where it's kind of critical. Let me know your thoughts of Miraidon down below. I feel like, personally, the Zapdos EX has been super underwhelming, but the Mew EX has been really, really strong. I'll hear your thoughts down below. Let me know if you would prefer the Path build going into a tournament, or just have the consistency plus the Collapsed Stadium to help out against the Lost Zone matchups. But yeah, that's it for today, and enjoy the games. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. So it looks like we get to go first in game number 1. We start with Miraidon EX, which you'll love to see. Tandem unit is one of the main selling point of this deck. It can thin really nicely, get all the lightning chaps into play, and really improve our ratios for those electric generators. We have 1 in hand, and we also have that Forest Seal Stone, so it's a really, really solid start. We're staring down a Comfey. In Lost Zone matchups, typically you only try and get 1 Flaaffy down and let that be your only single prize Pokemon. There can be situations where you do get Zapdos into the mix, but it really is sort of board dependent. It's something that we're typically going to keep hidden in the deck for a decent amount of time, though. Have prized a Raikou V, which is a little bit awkward because it is one of our stronger attackers in the matchup. It's just very efficient to get through single prize Pokemon, and every now and then you can get additional draws. But I'm pretty happy to hold on to everything here. Don't have to overcommit with a generator, because I'm looking at a Comfey, so I don't really expect to be hand disrupted in the opening stages of the game. And even if we were hand disrupted, I'd still have a really decent route to get a turn 2 Raikou anyway. I just know that I can slightly improve my odds by Ultra Balling next turn, so we're just going to let that fly. The opponent's had a decent start here with VIP Colrus. They've already revealed Grass Energy, so we know we're up against Giratina, which is great. Because we might be able to show off some Mew EX action. You never know. There is the Nest Ball for the Giratina V. We see the Grass Energy onto it. We're going to see the Switch Cart. So our opponent's had a really good turn 1. 4 in the Lost Zone. Get the hit in onto the Miraidon. Looking very solid. We pick up Lightning for turn, which actually is going to open up this hand even more with the potential to Flaaffy search here. Which is looking really nice. I can play the tandem unit first. I'm just going to get the Flying Peak into play. I think it's okay. It's a little bit vulnerable, but of course we want to have a wide enough board that I can bait out Collapsed at any time. That's always something that I'm sort of thinking about here. Going to hit 1 from the generator, which is nice, and then we can rip a Judge. The opponent had a really good start, so definitely nice to deal with a Comfey here and reduce their hand size at the same time. We're going to throw away that Flaaffy and a Lightning Energy because, once again, we never really want to put another single prize Pokemon into play. It gives the opponent too easy of a route with Greninja or Sableye. And I'm also able to bank an energy onto this Mew EX, which is massive because the only way that our opponent can one-shot our Raikou would be to use their V-Star. So if we get hit with a Giratina V-Star here, it would force a lot from an opponent just after a Judge, but, you know, they've just got to 5 in the Lost Zone, I believe, so with a Colrus they could get there. And if they do swing with the V-Star, we can have an easy response here. We have Flying Pikachu, which offers free retreat, and then we could just attach Dynamotor. The opponent actually does get to Colrus, so this gets them to gate range. They have already Lost Zone 1 V-Star, which might indicate they already have one in hand. There's a path to the peak. And are they coming in with Cram? No, it's going to be a gate. Is it Greninja or Tina? It is going to be the Tina coming in, so we are going to see the exact reason why Mew is so strong here. We got to pre-bank an energy onto this Mew. And because the Lost Zone decks often need to Colrus, they can't tackle the Mew on the bench. They just had to keep up in the prize race and get through our Raikou. Now we have a really nice response KO already lined up. And I can play an Iono here very happily. Also going to bench this Raichu V just to give myself the chance to draw Collapsed here, which would be pretty cool to undo some damage. Looks like that's not coming, but we do hit Bravery Charm. I'm definitely going to consider this on the Miraidon or onto the Mew. So the reason to put this onto Mew is to play around Snorlax. Snorlax might be a card that's more and more popular in Tina because it can respond on a Mew EX. Also, I'm happier putting it on the Mew when I had the Switch Cart as well, so I'm just going to heal the Miraidon out of Sable or Cram boss range, and we are going to respond on our opponent's Giratina with our Mew, stealing that Lost Impact, which is really, really nice. We're down to 3 prize cards now. Our opponent has picked up a Sableye, but it's forced to jet in with Comfey. Do they have a way of attacking with anything but Cram here? Doesn't look like it. Oh, it's going to be Boss's Orders. Okay, onto the Miraidon. So that Switch Cart was pretty handy. They're trying to buy a little bit of time here with that. Ideally, we can Collapsed here or Switch Cart, and I still have our Forest Seal Stone, so I'm pretty happy to attach to this Mew and go for the research. Attaching to the Mew may have been a little bit awkward, actually, because if I... Well, as you can see, I've drawn into Rope, and it's fortunate we actually got the Generator. I might have made a mistake there in that it was probably safer for me just to attach to Raichu there, because then I opened up the outs to draw Rope, which I have, and now I can just Forest Seal Stone for the Collapsed. But we can have a pretty easy Raichu KO here, and also undo a couple of cram hits, which is massive. And this is exactly why you love to see Collapsed Stadium in the Lost Zone matchups. It's not always expected, and it's so backbreaking for them when it comes off. So we will deal 120 with Sableye, into the Sableye. Again, Raichu's not a great attacker in the matchup necessarily. You pretty much try and only use this for the Tina, but obviously our only Raikou are the ones in the prizes, so unfortunately we have to discard a couple energy here, which might make things a little bit more awkward for us as we go, but it's okay for now. The opponent's got quite a few energy accounted for. We do see a Colress though. They're getting pretty low on their cards in deck actually. Get rid of Manaphy, which is good to know, because I could actually win next turn with a Boss's Orders top deck. I could hack the Greninja for game, no matter what they do. It looks like it's just Cram coming in again, which means we're in a really good 2-attack clock now, right? It shouldn't be too difficult for us to close out this game. We can just attach to the Raichu, play the Judge. We actually draw back into the Generator, which is really nice because I had too many Lightnings in my hand before the start of this turn. And yeah, now I can preload the Miraidon to just be an attachment away, or even just a Dynamotor away. Looks like my opponent's ideal turn would be to Greninja, Raichu, and Flaaffy. That's the only way they don't lose on board here, actually. Oh, that's not true. They could just deal with Flaaffy and not lose on board. But a Greninja would be the ideal play for them to race, at least. I think that was a Rod, finally. Getting some stuff back. So it looks like a Shuriken is on the cards. Yep, here comes the Mirage Gates. There's a Tina as well. So we do need to use Mew here to try and draw into a final energy to close the game. We obviously have Pokégear as well, so Gear can help us get towards a supporter. Should have a few ways of doing this. We can Ultra Ball, grab Zap, that's fine. Going to unit out the Mareep as well. Everything's a playable shiny card, so we can reduce this hand size for the restart. And straight away we hit the Raihan, so that will close out the game. Looking pretty nice for us. A nice win against Giratina, definitely a scary matchup. But the Mew was really huge there. And also you could see our hand disruptors at times definitely throwing the Lost Zone deck a little bit off their game. Let's get into our second game of the day. We get to go first again, which is also really nice. And we have that Miraidon EX start. And again, the hand's looking really good. You love starting tandem unit. That's the dream. We also have more ball search. We have some lightning energy that we could be discarding as well. Oh, wow, especially with that third lightning top deck. And we're looking at a Mew and 2 Charmanders. And this is definitely a matchup where we want to go double Flaaffy if we can. Because we need to lean into Raichu V, actually, in this one. If we can. Because we need some higher damage output. We need to be 360 no-scoping these Charizards, because they are super scary after we've taken the first couple prizes. Really important to just be cleanly sweeping through these. Looks like they're a Arceus Pidge build. We have the Switch Cart. I can also Ultra Ball away a Lightning here and get a Flaaffy already developed, which is looking good. We're actually going to go Mew here by the looks of things, because I can then restart plus Fleet-Footed to get this Ultra Ball as well. And turns out it's our last research, which is a little unfortunate, but I was already committing myself to this line, so... We also find Bravery Charm, which is actually massive. These have a really small window of opportunity to be really good in the matchup, but if you find them early enough, it can force the Charizard player to find Boss's Orders as well as Rare Candy combinations. So that's actually pretty huge. The opponent gets rid of Iono and Boss. I thought Boss would be mandatory for them here. But they actually go for Research, which makes the Raikou, Bravery Charm look really good here. They're also candying the bench. Oh, they're going to 4 energy. And then they can Starburst for that other Charizard. So they're playing 151 Charizard here. Yep, there it is. The Explosive Vortex. 330 damage. Double turn 2 candy. And they can take the knockout here. But we have Raihan in hand. So we can actually yoink this with Mew. And this is just one of the reasons why Mew is great. Even random attackers, you can find situations for the Mew to be very strong. And this looks like one of those situations. We have Raihan double Flaff. And that means we can take the response KO here. We're not out of the woods yet because we are on odd prize cards. But I don't think we had any situation where we were dealing with this guy without Mew EX here. Just a super fast Charizard. It is forcing us to discard 3 energy, which is a little bit rough. But we at least keep up in this race with 3 prizes to take. The opponent immediately gets their Charizard developed. And, oh man, they have boss as well. That's a little bit rough for us. Because now it's going to be really hard for us to take this KO with only 1 energy on the board. And it's looking like we're behind enough in the game where it might be time to consider that Thundershock. I feel like the Pidgeot hasn't been developed. The Charizard deck plays some Jet Energy possibly, but also maybe just like a Rope and nothing else. And we do hit the heads on Thundershock. So we actually have a way back into this game thanks to the 50-50 from the peak. And this is exactly why Pikachu's in the deck. It does give you those tiny windows. The opponent had to research a way of Pidgeot there. Oh, they do hit heads on Mesagoza. Thankfully it's just Charizard and not another Pidgeot. That would be terrifying. And the paralysis is stuck. So now we can at least use Raichu to KO here, because with 2 more Dynamotors, we can get that done. We can get rid of Boss and Zap just to thin the hand for a restart as well here. Really digging for Iono more than anything else, but didn't hit that or Judge, unfortunately, which would have been ideal. But we can just go into our Raichu now, and thanks to the Thundershock heads, we can take a KO here. And it's down to the opponent to find a candy on the spot. And if, you know, they didn't have it last time because they Mesagoza Charizard and they just didn't have candy. So can they respond on this Raichu now? Those were the supporters we were looking for a moment ago. See, Fire Energy. That's not scary. Doesn't really change anything. And it's a research. They had to get rid of Pidgeot and another Charizard. I think that's 3 Charizard in the bin. And they can't candy, so we do get over the line thanks to the help of both Mew and Flying Peak, which is a real advert for those cards staying in the deck over the Zapdos, which is basically the point I've been making in the video if you haven't followed along with it. We are getting into our final game then, and we have a Mareep start, but we have a lovely Nest Ball, which can get us into the game. And that's exactly what we're looking for here with the Miraidon. We have a Flaaffy prize, which is a little bit awkward, but nothing we can't manage. Looks like we're going for a couple of Vs here with the Forest Seal Stone coming onto the Flying Peak. Energy drop onto Raikou, and just a pass there. Lugia is actually a bit of a scary matchup. I feel like you're actually better going second in this matchup if you just trust your deck to be consistent. I feel like it's better to go first if you play the Path build, but if you play the build like this, given the choice in a best of 3, I would go second into Lugia, because you have such high donk potential, because their ball search is just so weak in the openings, especially without a draw supporter. And also just you having a turn 2 Judge against them when they didn't play a supporter turn 1 is massive. But the reason why this is awkward is, yes, we can take a 2-prize knockout, but we're likely doing it with a 2-prizer ourselves, And if that's the case, then the opponent can just Stone Journer us back, and then they're forcing us to Gust like the entire game, which is a little bit rough. I'm going to try and develop this Zapdos as well. Zapdos is really nice to weave in when we can, especially if Lugia doesn't evolve into a V-Star, or if they have to put a Luminion down, it can be huge. And then we're going to judge the opponent. They did get a couple Archeops already in the bin, but we are going to at least try and make it difficult for them. We can Fleetfoot as well. And I'm very nervous of the opponent just summoning into us, so I am going to use Star Alchemy here and get a Dynamo to Energy into play, just to try and have this response. I'm holding on to Boss's orders, which is nice, so it means that I'll guarantee a 2-prize knockout at least next turn, even if the opponent comes in with Stony Boy. Ideally, the opponent has to fish to play a supporter here. If they can do that, we could have a potential line of Zapdos KOing a 2-prizer. But no, just the summon, and here comes Stonehenge for the Giga Hammer. Yeah, triple single strike energy and a gift. And they're going to knock out Raikou. We can go back into Flying P. The hand is pretty dead, but we can at least boss here, which is quite massive. Let's take out the T-Tar, because we have the damage buff of Zapdos. I'm also going to vacuum away this Miraidon, just in case we get hand disrupted. Don't want to draw back into those cards, basically ever. And we can take another 2-prize knockout. So we are Gust away from win, but the opponent is going to be knocking us out immediately. I would have to find Boss and Energy. The opponent now has Ultra Ball for the fish. So we're definitely going to get hand disrupted here, right? We unfortunately don't have Mew EX developed. That's another great way for us to try and win next turn. We hit Iono Research. Those are probably some of the worst draws. Ultra Ball would be a huge draw here. Boss wouldn't be game for us with these two cards. We're at Raichu, which is also not ideal. I can develop Mareep here. Our opponent has taken a... they have to take a 2-prize knockout next turn, so I could just go for the Iono, which is what we are going to do here. I keep my board open so I can potentially Mew EX next turn to dig for Boss myself, because the idea here is I'm going to be passing with Zapdos, right? So next turn I have a decent shot. With this 2-card hand, I'm hoping to dodge Boss here and to find it myself next turn with Mew EX. The opponents can't use Giga Hammer next turn either. But they do have 4 single strike energy available, and they have the fish. Oh, the opponent had the perfect game, basically, where they had Boss into Fish Iono into Fish Boss after we Iono'd them. So that is how we can unfortunately lose against Lugia. It is going to be important. There will be times when you can weave in Mew EX of yourself to protect yourself against Iono, because we still had a really easy route to victory there. It just required Boss, and we didn't have it on the crucial turn. But even then, we Iono'd them to 2, so it's still a bad beat to go down like that. But yeah, that was Miraidon gameplay. Pretty interesting games. Cool to see the Mew EX in action in a couple of those as well. Let me know your thoughts of the list that was played, and whether or not you like this over the Path to the Peak build. And I'll see you tomorrow for another video. Cheers.